Let's go ahead and refresh our memory as far as what multiplication means. Sometimes we forget. And how it relates to division. So let's look at this first statement. 12 equals 4 times 3. Well, we can actually rearrange that. And these two things actually are the same thing, just written in two different ways. On the left, we have 12 times 4 equals 3. Sorry, 12 equals 4 times 3. On the right, we have 12 divided by 4 equals 3. They go hand in hand. They're just two different ways of writing the same thing. Well, here, let's look at the second line. 16 equals 8 times 2. Well, that must mean that 16 divided by 8 equals 2. Okay, and we could also write 16 divided by 2 equals 8. Point is, the numerator is your answer, and to the product, so there's your numerator, and then you could put either one of those as the denominator over here. 35 equals 7 times 5. Well, if that's true, then that means that 35 divided by 7 is equal to 5. So you see kind of the same exact flow here at the bottom. So all that to show you that it also works for negative numbers or anything in general. So let's go ahead and look at these expressions here. Suppose I want to know what positive 1 divided by negative 1 is. And I don't know what that is. But what I can do is I can rearrange it so that, well, even though I don't know what it is, I do know that negative 1 times whatever my answer is must give me the numerator back, positive 1. And we've actually already shown that the only thing that could be is negative 1 times negative 1. We've shown that a negative times a negative equals a positive. So if that's true, then that actually must have been my original answer, negative 1. So sometimes when you're solving a division problem, the easiest way to show it is to show why the multiplication is true. The same can go for positive 3 divided by negative 1. We know that negative 1 times negative 3 gives you a positive 3. So therefore the original answer to our question must have been negative 3. So we're starting to see that a positive divided by a negative gives you a negative back. So what about positive a divided by negative 1? Well, just like before we had the positive 3 and the negative 1, now it's just positive a. Well, we know that we've already shown that negative 1 times negative a gives you positive a. So therefore, the answer to our original question must have been negative a. Okay, so that's actually what we're trying to show in this lesson, is that if you take a positive number divided by negative 1, you get the negative version of that number. Okay, another example, which we've looked at before, would be positive, let's try to write that again. Positive, I'm not very good at handwriting, let's try this one more time. Positive 9 divided by negative 1 would give you negative 9. Okay, so again, this is just the rule written. Positive a divided by negative 1 gives you negative a. So let's look at some more concrete examples. Here's the 9 again. 9 divided by negative 1 is going to give you the negative 9 back. Okay, let's look at this one together. 5/4 divided by what number gives you negative 5/4? Well, if I started with a positive and I ended up with a negative, then this answer right here must be negative, right? And it can only be one thing. Answer is negative 1. Again, we're doing all this because this stuff comes up so much when you're working out problems. As math gets more complicated, you need to be certain without a shadow of a doubt, and it needs to stick in your head so that you don't make simple mistakes. So how about this one? What number divided by negative 1 gives you negative 1.7 back? Well, if I started with something and a divided by negative and I ended up with a negative, it must have been positive, right? And we're dividing by negative 1, so therefore the answer must be 1.7. Here's that word again, simplify, which means what? Yes, that means this to make simple or to make shorter. So 50 divided by negative 1 must give you what back? Negative 50, right? We have a positive divided by a negative, which gives you a negative back. Okay, how about 5 divided by negative 1? If we want to simplify that, we would actually just, well, we've got a positive here, right? And a negative here. And it's 1. So these two numbers are going to be the same because it's 1, but it's negative, so the sign is going to change. And that's another way to look about it. Look at it. If this original sign is positive, okay, if that's positive and this is negative 1, then all I'm doing is just changing the sign so that it becomes negative 5. That's another way of looking at it. How about this one? Positive pi divided by negative 1. Again, we could just think about, well, all I'm really doing is changing the sign right here if I'm dividing by negative 1. So therefore, that's what I'm doing. I'm just putting a negative in front. That's all you have to do. And if it starts out negative, we're going to see that it becomes positive. Simplify y divided by negative 1. Again, this is a positive. I'm dividing by negative 1, so this sign must change and become negative. Okay. Mn, which is just m times n, so you can think of it as 8 times 7 or negative 4 times 3, whatever, and we're dividing by negative 1. What do you think is going to happen to that sign? It's just going to change and become what? Negative, right? So therefore the answer is negative mn. Okay. Now we have a negative a divided by negative 1. We're going to look at this in the next lesson, but I told you that already that this sign is just going to change, right? If I'm dividing by negative 1, then this original sign is going to change. So if it changes from negative, it must become what? Positive, right? Next lesson I'm going to show a little bit more why that's true. Finally, if I take 0, which is a number, and divide by negative 1, what do you think the answer is going to be? Now you might think negative 0, right? Because we've been showing that you just put the negative out front. But 0 doesn't have a sign to begin with. So if hypothetically, if I change from negative 0 to positive 0, it doesn't matter. It's still 0. And like I said, 0 in fact doesn't have a sign. So just put 0 for that one. We've already shown in a previous lesson that 0 divided by anything gives you 0 back. So that's kind of a refresher as well. So just as a recap, the name of this lesson is dividing a number by negative 1. And you get the negative of that number back when you do so.